people of Earth greet you in the spirit of peace and humility. As we venture out of our solar system, we hope to earn the trust and friendship of other worlds. Hello there! Quick episode interjecting into my existing series. Just wanted to cover it. We're looking at Friendship 1, a probe launched from Earth in 2067, just a few years after first contact had been made between Earth and the Vulcans. This was an early attempt of humanity to contact other sentient races that existed in the galaxy, as the Vulcans, being the dicks they were back then, didn't want to share information with Earth and weren't willing to tell them about other races or how to find them, or maybe weren't even bothering to tell other races they'd met humans. Anyway, this probe, as I said, was launched in 2267 by the United Earth Space Probe Agency. It was equipped with a warp drive as well as data on humanity and music and other such things to help identify humans to the rest of the wider galaxy. It travelled for hundreds of years, maintaining contact back with Earth, actually giving back quite useful information, if more basic, considering its quite simple technology, but Earth lost contact with it in 2248 and would eventually rediscover its location in the 24th century. Before we continue actually though, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Tell me what you thought. This was from a season 7 episode of Star Trek Voyager, sometimes a divisive series. Let me know. To give a bit of backstory on the probe before we get into its adventures. The probe, as I said, was launched by the United Earth Space Probe Agency. Its registry was United Earth Space Probe Agency 1, named Friendship 1. How many of these were built by Earth? Unknown, but probably multiple. I think we can say safely there were probably multiple of these probes made. Humanity was eager to get contact with other races, that's why they built it. And there is a rumour that Zephyr Cochrane signed the inside of the warp reactor of every warp engine built during his lifetime. So there may have been literally, although it was probably erased by all the antimatter, his signature on the inside of the casing anyway. It's also probably not true. But imagine how many warp drives that would be. They were stamping these things out pretty much by then. They're like sitting in the Honda factory signing every engine personally. It's just pretty wasting your time anyway. Getting off topic. The agency would eventually dissolve and would later fold into the newly created agency in the early 22nd century known as Starfleet, as would several other space agencies such as the International Space Agency and some military organizations would all fold into being Starfleet. As I said, the probe was launched, went off into deep space, eventually was lost contact with, arrived in the Delta Quadrant and arrived at an unknown planet in the Delta Quadrant in grid 310. The local inhabitants, thinking the probe was some kind of gift, would reverse engineer the technology, but instead of using it for exploration would build antimatter missiles which were incredibly destructive and polluted and poisoned their entire planetary atmosphere. And they would believe that this was a prelude to invasion by humanity, because humans had sent the thing knowing that they would misuse the technology and destroy themselves, leaving their planet habitable for humans who could then come and terraform the world and make it habitable for themselves. Even though it was embedded in a nuclear winter, Starfleet had the technology to reverse such problems. The message sent by the probe had been memorized by several members of the Voyager crew while in high school. It was something that was often studied because this was early warp space exploration era, and although it's from an era of Starfleet and human history that's not very well documented, what little has been effectively studied, and people like obviously Tom Paris and Harry Kim, who had an interest in space exploration, obviously took an interest in such periods of history and would have information like that memorized because they're massive nerds. I can relate. Anyway, of course, this was not Starfleet's intention or humanity's intention, as the race would quickly learn. With the technology that the Federation had, they could easily obliterate the local population and take over the planet. There was no need for such subversive tactics and waiting hundreds of years to then come along and colonize the world. With how many habitable worlds there are in the galaxy, with one in every 40 star systems in the galaxy having a habitable planet in it, suitable for human life on average, there's really no need. there's far more habitable planets, or potentially habitable planets, than there are races to fill them. So there's simply no need. But this race obviously believed it. Eventually, after contact with the race was firmly established by Voyager and its crew, they would help fix the planetary atmosphere despite the hostility of the natives in an effort to save the species. And there is some kind of allegory here with basically there was an element of blame that humanity shared for this. Humans were very naive for the first 100 years of warp travel. The Vulcans were correct about that. Blindly going out and telling other races the location of Earth without knowing anything about them. It'd be like you encounter a Borg cube, it's like, yeah, here's the location of our homeworld. Borg like, thanks, you're assimilated now. It's like, it's not the best idea. And getting to know people out in deep space first before exchanging such information was probably more pragmatic. But Earth very blindly and foolishly and naively thought that everyone would be receptive to their advances. They thought that if they come with a big smile and a big greeting, everyone would be happy. But as Archer and the Enterprise crew very quickly learned, that was not the case. Many races treated first contact differently. Many races, like for example the Borg, like for example the Hirogen, the Dominion. These races or organizations treat first contact with other races very differently to how humans treat it. And Friendship 1 in many ways was a physical embodiment of that mindset. This gung-ho cowboy spirit of adventure, but without realizing that the other races have been out there for hundreds of years. To them it's not a great adventure, it's mundane, it's everyday. It's the equivalent to them. Going from their homeworld to Earth is like maybe at best a weekend vacation away in your own country, in your own backyard. Maybe a quick hop on an airplane to a slightly distant land. It's interesting, it's curious, but it's not special. To humans it's special because it's new. The Vulcans have been spacefaring for thousands of years. Many other races have been spacefaring even longer. It wasn't interesting, and humanity was a primitive world with nothing to offer at this time. It needed time to grow. In this regard, the Vulcans are correct. The Vulcans were probably also, in some ways, correct that Archer was the wrong choice to command the Enterprise. Quick thing I forgot to note when recording this. This was actually the first appearance of the now famous arrowhead symbol widely used by Starfleet, meaning that this symbol in one form or another was around just 4 years after first contact and the development of warp travel by humanity. I just thought that was interesting. Starfleet had many other starships that have been operating beyond the confines of our solar system for decades. There were, of course, shorter range missions, but in these shorter range hops around the local area of space, many of the crews and captains of these ships had accumulated vastly more experience than the crew of the Enterprise. Archer's position to captain was almost ceremonial because his dad had designed the engine, which is pretty much how he got command. But in reality, he wasn't necessarily, at least on paper, the best choice. And you could understand the Vulcans' apprehension. He was hostile towards them, he was impulsive, naive. Now, although he did quickly learn the lessons, and ultimately the appointment of him as the commanding officer of Starfleet's first Warp 5 ship, and ultimately flagship of Starfleet and Earth, was a very good idea. You can see how superficially it seemed like it wasn't a good idea. Because, again, he made a lot of mistakes, he stumbled. Maybe a more experienced captain who already had experience dealing with other species, who'd been in command of a ship for a number of years rather than being a test pilot and then given what seemingly seems to be an honorific command, because we don't ever hear Archer, unlike Picard or Janeway or other people, ever mention another starship they ever served on. As far as I can tell, Archer never served on another starship. He only served on the Enterprise as captain. He basically went from test pilot to captain. It's that simple. Friendship 1 was an extension, or be it an earlier version of, but an extension of this mindset. It was not the best idea to send this probe out. It wasn't the most thought through idea. But you can see how it descended from 20th century concepts like Voyager and other such things. So, naive, intention noble, intention good, but maybe not the best idea, as we can see by the effects the thing had when it encountered a pre-warp civilization. Not humanity's fault, their own fault for misusing the tech, but still, you can see how they got there.
I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.